Trump rejected the response sent by Tehran and put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard on high military alert. On Monday, May 11, 2026, the crisis escalated after Iran responded to the United States proposal through Pakistan. They demanded an end to the war, the lifting of sanctions, financial compensation, the release of frozen assets, and guarantees against new attacks. Trump's reaction was blunt. The Iranian response was considered unacceptable. And that's where the situation weighs against Tehran, because the White House didn't treat the message as serious diplomacy, but as an attempt to buy time. Meanwhile, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard is trying to keep a structure standing that has already been pressured by attacks, sanctions, and regional isolation. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality ever seen, following the credibility standard of Milson Alves. Tehran wants immediate relief, wants unblocked funds, wants an end to military pressure, and wants to prevent the United States and Israel from resuming attacks on its sensitive sites. The problem is that Trump did not agree to play this game. The American message was clear. There will be no agreement just to save the regime's appearance. The central demand remains the same: to prevent Iran from maintaining dangerous nuclear capabilities, including controls over uranium enrichment and facilities that Washington and Israel consider a direct threat. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard panicked because Trump's response took away from Tehran the main instrument the regime had tried to use in recent days: negotiation as a shield. While the Islamic Republic talked about ending the war, reports of drones, attacks on Gulf areas, and pressure on commercial vessels continued to appear in the news. In practice, the regime tried to come to the table asking for relief and, at the same time, kept its intimidation machine active. For Trump, this reinforced the view that Iran was repeating the old tactic of dragging out talks, asking for concessions, and preserving its tools of intimidation. On the American side, the rejection was not just a harsh statement. It was accompanied by military signaling. And U.S. forces and the Israeli Defense Forces are holding discussions about the next steps against positions of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, while Netanyahu avoids revealing public details about military plans. This calculated silence has become part of the pressure, and this is the point that scares the Iranian leadership. Trump is not giving the regime the comfort of knowing where, when, and how the response might come. The regional impact has also changed. Saudi Arabia condemned attacks against the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait, while other Arab nations showed solidarity in opposing Iranian actions. This reaction is important because the crisis no longer appears only as a dispute between Washington, Israel, and Tehran. The behavior of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard has started to directly trouble Gulf governments, who see drones, threats, and maritime instability as risks to their own ports, airports, and energy routes. Iran wanted to appear strong but ended up drawing more pressure onto itself. The United States proposal also backed Tehran into a corner because it didn't just talk about a temporary pause. According to reports from the international press, Washington was seeking a memorandum with heavy restrictions on the Iranian nuclear program, including a 20-year moratorium, no enrichment, removal of highly enriched uranium, and dismantling of sensitive nuclear facilities. For the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, this is equivalent to losing the strategic heart of the regime. For Trump, that's exactly the goal: to prevent Iran from using negotiations to protect the same apparatus that threatens Israel. It pressures the Gulf and supports its armed allies throughout the region. The Iranian response still tried to reverse the narrative. Tehran declared that it had rejected the American proposal, even after Trump had already refused the Iranian response. This detail shows the battle behind closed doors. The regime needs to tell its domestic audience that it was not humiliated, that it is not cornered, and that it still sets the terms. But the sequence of events weighs against that version. The proposal went through Pakistan, reached Washington, was evaluated, and ended up being rejected. The regime may try to declare victory to its own supporters. But the American rejection exposed the fragility of a negotiation in which Tehran asked for relief without delivering the real dismantling demanded by the United States. The planned meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping also comes into play. Washington wants to pressure China over its economic relationship with Iran. especially oil purchases and indirect support that helped Tehran breathe even under sanctions. This point expands the crisis beyond the Middle East. Trump looks at the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, but also targets the external networks that support the regime. If Beijing continues to give economic oxygen to Tehran, the White House may treat the problem as part of a bigger dispute. Netanyahu also put a new piece on the table by arguing that Israel should reduce to zero the military aid funding it receives from the United States over the next decade. The statement does not weaken the alliance. It reinforces the idea of a tougher, more strategic partnership that is less dependent on political speeches in Washington. Israel wants to show that it will continue buying, cooperating, exchanging technology, and acting alongside the United States, but without appearing to be a hostage to annual aid. In the midst of the crisis with Iran, this message is meant to make Tehran understand that the United States-Israel partnership does not depend only on money. It depends on a common threat, shared intelligence, and political decision. History shows why Trump rejecting a weak deal with Iran carries real weight. In 1981, Israel destroyed the Iraqi nuclear reactor at Osirak near Baghdad because they understood that waiting too long could create a threat that would be impossible to control later. The operation was criticized by many governments at the time, but it became known as an example of preventive action when a nuclear threat grows under diplomatic rhetoric. In 2007, Israel acted again against a suspected reactor in Syria. That was later described by the International Atomic Energy Agency as a suspected reactor in Syria. The lesson for Trump and Netanyahu is straightforward. When hostile regimes use negotiations to buy time, the window for action can close quickly. Comparing Libya clarifies the difference between Israel's actions toward a suspected reactor and the one in Syria. In 2003, the Libyan government announced that it would abandon its weapons of mass destruction programs and open the process for international verification. From there came negotiations, inspections, and relief from sanctions. The Libya case is remembered because it showed a simple logic. First comes the actual handover, then comes the diplomatic reward. Iran tries to do the opposite. It asks for an end to sanctions, unfrozen funds, military guarantees, and political leverage before carrying out the main dismantling step. That's why Trump rejected it. Other nations also show that pressured regimes back down when they realize that the cost of resisting has become greater than the cost of giving in. North Korea has stayed alive for decades precisely because it bought time, negotiated, froze, resumed, threatened, and came back to the table whenever it needed relief. Bashar al-Assad's Syria hid sensitive activities until it was hit and then had to live with years of international suspicion. Iran knows this playbook. The difference now is that Trump is trying to close off all the exits at the same time. He rejects a weak deal, puts military pressure on Tehran, talks with Israel, pressures China, and leaves the Gulf nations increasingly irritated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. The next step depends on Tehran. If the Islamic Republic insists on asking for rewards without delivering the core of the agreement, the chances of a new escalation increase. If it accepts a real diplomatic surrender, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard loses power from within. That's why the panic is so visible. Either path hurts the regime. Trump's rejection cut off the easy way out. Coordination with Israel keeps the threat in the air. Arab pressure narrows its regional room to maneuver, and pressure on China hits their pockets. I'm Milson Alves News, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.